As the host of Locked On Big 12, I don't get paid to blow hot air up their skirt, but Texas is going to dominate the SEC. This is a Locked On Longhorns, Locked On Big 12 crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Another big week in sports, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Big 12, Locked On Longhorns crossover edition. I am Drake Toll from the Number One Big 12 podcast in America, Locked On Big 12. Thanks for making this show and Locked On Longhorns your first listen every single day. Texas will dominate the Big 12. That is where we start with Jonathan Davis, as well as Oklahoma not being ready to compete with the big dogs in the Southeastern Conference. And can the Big 12 stay alive without those Longhorns? Jonathan, off the very top, it pains me, man. We did a show about 6 months ago where I said that Texas would never make the college football playoff and they were doomed in the SEC. But today, that has all changed. They have a broken record in Big 12 championships. It's not just football. Texas is about to dominate the SEC from not just a brand standpoint, but on the field in just about everything.
Yeah, so I just want to say that you probably haven't even realized it yet, but you slipped up and said Texas will dominate the Big 12, and I just want to say we've already done that.
Gosh, dang
but as far as the SEC, hopefully, that's the case. You look at baseball, and it's really competitive in the SEC, so I think if you can get into that league and dominate it, then
time out. We're not doing that. Let's do football. Arkansas.
You just said, I'm reading the prompt on the screen. It says dominate the SEC in many sports.
But what I need to make so clear, I'm trying to help you here. What I need to make so clear is in my head, Jonathan, here's what I was going to, is how do I, as a Big 12 guy, qualify that comment? Many sports, sure. Baseball, sure. Swimming, I don't give a crap. Yes, you're good at the Governor's Cup, whatever they call it. Sure, fine. But name me one program outside of Georgia that Texas is going to be worse than in the biggest sport in college.
All right, so you already set me up for failure because you literally asked me about, you literally mentioned it more than one sport. And then now that I'm not talking about football, okay, cool. We came to talk about football. They came to listen about football. Okay, cool. When I look at it, right, I'm just going to go off of what you sent me earlier, right? I'm going to answer the question of why will Texas dominate in the SEC, right? Because I believe that it will. And I think there's a multitude of reasons, right? I've really thought about this all day, how I was going to answer this. There's a multitude of reasons, right? But I think the first thing and the most clear reason is Texas has really, really good football players, right? And I know the narrative is Texas has always had really good football players, and they definitely have. But I think, these teams, as you've seen recently, are built the right way. When your best two players last year were defensive tackles, that's the reason that you had the third best run defense in the country and you went to the college football playoffs. So where the talent is certainly matters. But blue chip ratio has always determined the best teams in college football, right? The best teams in college football are always the ones with the best players. There are no surprises there. When we go into this season, we've noted Ohio State, Oregon, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Texas as the national championship contenders. Why? Because we feel like they have the best players. Drake, you're a historian in college football, so I'm going to ask you, when is the last time we had a Cinderella win the championship? Because TCU was a Cinderella. Or when was the last time the national championship or national champion in college football came out of nowhere? I'm going to give you the floor.
That Auburn year, Auburn had Cam Newton, so that's kind of tough but the year,
they did come out of nowhere, but I mean, blue chip ratio, it's Cam Newton. Right? So there you go.
Maybe the best college quarterback ever. Yeah, man, dude, when you talk about underdogs to win it, the closest you get is literally Ohio State as the 4 seed in the playoff, and I'm not sure how much of an underdog that is.
Exactly. Right. And so let's just be real. Right. I know the narrative is Texas is going to struggle in the SEC. Texas has one of the best rosters in the country. So theoretically, they should be one of the best teams. Right now, when you get into the playoffs, that comes down to, in the margins, coaching, quarterback play, whatever, that could be a struggle. But in terms of why will Texas run through the SEC? Because they have one of the best rosters in the country. Now, speaking of this SEC, right, that, I think it's just a narrative at this point. Right. I think people it's just wishful thinking. People hope that Texas will falter in the SEC. I don't think anybody that really watches football and can take the emotions out of it when they need to thinks that Texas will struggle in the SEC. But when people say the SEC, it's like almost if they have like a perception of the best teams from each school of all time, right? Like when they think of their version of the SEC, it's 2019 LSU, any version of Alabama you want to bring up, 2021 Georgia, like it's, you know what I mean? Like 2008 Florida. That's not who's on Texas's schedule this year, right? When we look at Texas SEC schedule this year, most people think Billy Napier and the University of Florida, their football program is a joke. They come to Austin. Vanderbilt, next question. Kentucky, I mean, like, is that who's going to be daunting for the University of Texas? Most people think Texas A&M is a joke. That's going to be a good game, rivalry game, but people aren't checking for Texas A&M. Arkansas, Texas has to go on the road. That's going to be a tough game. Most people think Arkansas is a joke at this point.
They might go 4-8. Yeah.
Does Jeff Lebby scare you? Does Blake Shapen scare you? No. You answer that for me, Drake. You're the expert on Blake Shapen.
Right. I don't think they scare me, Jonathan.
Exactly. So outside of that, Oklahoma, that's Red River, that's, neutral site. Anything can happen in that game. You're left with Georgia, right? And so, yeah, I know people want to say Texas is going to struggle in the SEC, but this is not the SEC that you're thinking of. You're thinking of some mythical SEC that does not exist, right? Because really right now it's Georgia, potentially Ole Miss, maybe Alabama, Texas, obviously, Texas is in that class, and then everybody else, right? And I just don't think that the SEC that's in front of Texas on their actual schedule, right, not the hypothetical schedule in people's heads, is not that daunting, right? Now, maybe what people are arguing is the like week in and week out, right? Having to face a Oklahoma, then a Georgia, then a Kentucky, then Arkansas. I guess maybe, Texas could falter in that sense, but please, I mean, look at their schedule. Look at Texas's schedule, and then look at the roster they'll be stepping on the field with. And please tell me how you think they won't succeed in the SEC.
Now, what you're telling me, and I will kind of put words in your mouth here a bit. The SEC is not it's not what it was even 3 years ago. It feels like there is more room for autonomy, more room for Texas schedule to be easier. Look, it's not a brutal schedule. I think with that schedule you just named, like Utah probably wins 10 games, and Utah's a really good football team, but it goes to show that Texas got a favorable schedule in the SEC, and it's not crazy that, despite how much it pains me to say it, the Longhorns are going to dominate. Like, if you don't win 10 games of that schedule, something went dramatically wrong for Steve Sarkisian and company. Coming up, though, the opposite is true for Oklahoma. I believe Oklahoma's like, hello, 6-6 to start things off. I'm sure you're not upset with that on Locked On Big 12, Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Look, Yahoo Finance is exactly where I go to keep all my finances together. Here's the problem. I am freshly 23 years old and have zero idea what finance means. I wasn't one of those bros in college. So what do? I go to Yahoo Finance, which consolidates everything. Right now have an investment with Schwab and a 401k with Fidelity. What does that mean? I still don't really know, but Yahoo Finance helps me consolidate all of it, keep it all in one spot, and at least see it. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor looking for extra guidance like me, Yahoo Finance is built for you. A community of over 90 million users each month. Their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That is yahoofinance.com. Jonathan Davis of Locked On Longhorns. The Oklahoma Sooners get Tennessee to open up SEC play. They get Auburn on the road, Texas in Red River, South Carolina, I'll give you that one probably, but then get this, at Ole Miss, Maine, at Missouri, Alabama, at LSU. Say hello to the 6-6 Brent Venables Oklahoma Sooners. From my chair, OU is not ready to compete in the SEC.
I just want to say, piggybacking off of what I said in the last segment, right? Like, you have to look at the schedule and you have to look at the roster that the team is coming in with, right? And I think like it's the vast opposite of what we just described in terms of the scenario for Texas. You're talking about an Oklahoma team that's coming in with a depleted roster, was coming in with a lot of question marks. I mean, squarely at the most important position in quarterback, right? I mean, the next start that Jackson Arnold makes will be his second one, right? Like, I mean, then you're talking about winning high-level games in the SEC. And then you talked about that schedule, right? Like, every team that Texas somewhat got to avoid, right? Because right now, if you talk about the teams that are up in the SEC, Texas got Georgia, That's it. Right? The rest of the ones that are up in the SEC right now are all on Oklahoma's schedule. So, I mean, last year, it's crazy how things have flipped so fast, because I remember just a few years ago, Texas would come into the season just being able to brag if they beat Oklahoma. And Oklahoma was trying to win conference championships. And last year, Texas won a conference championship, and Oklahoma was just happy that they beat Texas. But when you look at the end of the season, all right, no momentum, right? I think they start off 6-0 because they were still undefeated when they beat Texas, right? But then they end the season 4-3 with bad losses to, I think, all three teams they lost to, even though Arizona was good. Arizona, that was a bad game. Then they lost to
Kansas on the road.
Kansas, exactly, Kansas. In the back half of the season, lost to Jason Bean, right? I mean, Texas, come on now. But, so, I mean, they end the season with no momentum, going 4-3 in their last 7 games with everything right in front of them, right? I mean, conference championship, college football playoff appearance right in front of them. They haven't had a stellar offseason based on what I've seen. You know, I'm not just in Sooner Wire or anything like that. You know what I mean? But when you look at it, like, I think they lost their 2 best offensive linemen in terms of Tyler Guyton. Shout out to the Dallas Cowboys. You know, hopefully he's our left tackle of the future. Then they lost the guard, right? The true freshman guard that was one of the best players on the team. He went to Missouri, and all of the Oklahoma fans like went and started commenting on his dad's insurance thing on Google. You know what I mean? So the Oklahoma, they've just gotten like real Aggie-ish this offseason. But I mean, like even say, like when you look at the schedule, I was being generous in giving them 8-4, right? But they just feel real 8-4ish right now. And I remember the days like when you're watching Oklahoma, you're coming into the season, you're like, damn, they got Jalen Hurts, or they got Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield.
Think back to Sam Bradford.
I mean, like you used to come into the season like, damn, like Oklahoma got players, right? And I'm like, who on their offense right now are we excited to watch? I mean, like Jackson Arnold, I think he's going to be a good quarterback. I think right now they're relying on him to win games that Texas is not relying on Arch Manning to win, which I think is very telling. But who on this Oklahoma off? I mean, you coach Locked On. I mean, you host Locked On Big 12. You still got us till July 1st. So like who on that Oklahoma offense should we be excited about this year? Who moves the needle for Oklahoma offensively going into the SEC in 2024?
That's the thing is every year you mentioned it like, all right, CeeDee Lamb's going to be the guy. Okay, Jalen Hurts is going to make noise. All right, even Dylan Gabriel is going to be a guy who people got to watch out for in Big 12 play. And now moving to the SEC, where are your big names? Where's the guy that nationally, like Texas, okay, and again, not to, I hate just tooting that horn, but you kind of got to when Quinn Ewers shows up on the front of NCAA 25. And NCAA 25 doesn't decide who's good at football, but it decides the stars of the game. When that guy is on the cover and Oklahoma is in essence non-existent, like who would they put? Who would be the guy? Who's the guy you're like, you know what? That's the dude that I want to play with in that video game. Or that's the dude that I don't want to play against in real life in SEC ball. I don't think Oklahoma has it. And you're walking into, again, objectively, it's not me. It's just what it is. The best conference in college football still. Is it the deepest? There's a conversation. But from a top-heavy standpoint, that top 5 is better than any other top 5, period. And I don't think Oklahoma's ready for that.
Right. I would agree with that. The next point I want to get into, like, we're just going to, like, surgically, you know what I mean? Like, you know, dissect this Oklahoma football team.
Cut them up.
Yeah. What would you say after 2 years, right? We've now seen, 2 years of the Brent Venables experience. What would you say Brent Venables' superpower is, right? Like where can Brent Venables win his team a game that they potentially are not supposed to win? Yep. What advantage do they have coaching wise going into the SEC, Drake?
Ooh, the argument that a lot of OU fans want to give you is that Venables was 2 hands off in year 1, that he was kind of the field general, Nick Saban type, let the assistants cook. And that obviously didn't work. They got cranked. And then in year 2, Venables takes over more of the defensive side of things and play calling. And then they win 10 games. And I'm with you. I don't know if it was an impressive 10 games. I don't know if their 10-3 record, especially the way it ended with that loss to Kansas, Oklahoma State, and Arizona, was impressive enough for me to say, oh, wow, Oklahoma's scary in the SEC. I also don't like, there's still a rift. There's still a quarter of OU fans who are like, I don't think Brent Venables is the coach of the future. And when that's what your fan base thinks, whereas in a Texas scenario, everybody's bought into Steve Sarkisian, who's coming off a college football playoff appearance, that's not good. Not good for the boys in Norman.
Yeah, I'm just, when I look at it, you know what I mean? And I'm definitely not, I mean, you know me, Drake, like, you know, I'm not Texas homer to the point where I'm just going to come on here and bash Oklahoma for no reason, right? If I felt like they had a healthy football program right now, or I felt like they were going to come into the season and make noise. Like I said, I still have them at 8-4, right? Even with everything we've just described, even though you've kind of pushed me a little bit closer to 6-6.
Well, look,
they still have to play Texas outside of all those other schools you mentioned in the SEC. But like I said, if you're an Oklahoma fan, and this is where I say that they're feeling real Aggie-ish right now, because Texas A&M, like everybody can logically look at Texas A&M, even when they bring in one of the best recruiting classes of all time. And we can be like, we can still put it in perspective and say like, yeah, that's Texas A&M. Like you may feel great about what you have, but we know how it's going to end. And I feel like everybody's looking at Oklahoma like that right now. Like Oklahoma, look at what y'all have. Look at what y'all lost. Like, what do you have to be excited about? How can you realistically go into the SEC thinking you're just going to win 10 games? And it's like, they're looking at it like they have the best roster since sliced bread. And it's just really reminiscent of like Texas A&M. Like it just feels real Aggie-ish to me right now, like how they can look at what they have and feel like they're being slept on. Like if everybody's sleeping on you, you're probably the one wrong. Like, or you're probably the one sleep. Like Drake, let me know something.
Yeah. I'll end it with this. When it comes to Oklahoma, I really believe that in the Big 12, they are a preseason number 4. If Texas and OU are still there, behind teams like Utah, Oklahoma State, who beat them last year, returns in essence everybody. The Sooners wouldn't be a scary team in Big 12 play. Texas ahead of them, Oklahoma State ahead of them, Utah ahead of them. In the SEC, I can guarantee you they're going to lose at Ole Miss. They're going to lose at Missouri, to Alabama, and to LSU. That's your last 4 SEC games of the season. Good luck even before that at Auburn. Not good. Not good in Norman. Coming up, good for the Big 12. Texas and Oklahoma leaving. Can this conference stay alive? Locked on Big 12, Locked on Longhorns. Your team as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, FanDuel's where I go. End of the month is coming up, and it's like rent is due. And it's like, do I want to lean on FanDuel? Well, you don't have to lean on them, but you can sure have a little bit of fun with it. FanDuel is my place to go with the NHL and NBA being in the playoffs. Now, I don't watch a lot of NHL hockey, but I do like the Dallas Stars because I live in the Dallas area. And so I'll go bet on them to win their series at FanDuel. I'll put $50 on it to win $50. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Do I know a lot about hockey? No. Do I like betting on the team that wins? Yes. I think the Stars are going to win, so I'll bet on them at FanDuel. It's $150 in spreads, in money lines, player props, more. You can use it on all that if your $5 bet hits. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon, America's number one sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com today. Jonathan Davis of Locked On Longhorns. Without Texas and Oklahoma, from your perspective, can the Big 12 survive as college football has gone into complete chaos?
Well, yeah, I think they can. And I just want to say I love the new name, how we've shifted from Power 5 to Core 4 already, rest in peace to Pac-12. But I mean, talk about a seamless transition. Like, I love the Core 4. I like that. You know what I'm saying?
Good. Good.
But yeah, I think when you look at it, obviously the meat of college football, I think the talk of the town will be the SEC and the Big 10, right? But I think you still have the ACC and Big 12 that can produce competitive football. And I think now with the 12-team playoffs, right, you'll have Big 12 teams in the playoffs every year, so they don't need Texas or Oklahoma in terms of on the schedule to get to the biggest games in college football. I think you have a natural draw in terms of Colorado, Travis Hunter, and Shedeur Sanders that's we've seen already, right? They affect the numbers, right, in ways that nobody else can. Just like Caitlin Clark, she's affecting the numbers in ways that nobody else can. You just have to acknowledge that. And so the Big 12 has a meal ticket in terms of Colorado, Deion, and Shedeur Sanders. But my question is how long does that continue, or what draws casual fans to the Big 12? Because we know casual fans move the needle now more than ever, right? Yep. Right? Like, so we know
and people say like t-shirt fans. T-shirt fans actually move the needle now.
I don't want to say t-shirt fans. Right? There's a lot of connotation behind that. But no, because I think a t-shirt fan is like somebody who it's like used as a slur almost, or like an insult. Like, why are you so passionate about the University of Texas? You didn't go there, right? Like, that's not what a casual fan is to me. A casual fan is like, I'm not going to watch the majority of games during the regular season, but I'm going to tune into the college football playoff games because it's the playoffs, or I'm going to tune into the marquee matchups. And what matchups can the Big 12 create that will be marquee to the casual fan? What games can the Big 12 create that have college football playoff or national championship implications? When you look at it this year off top, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, SEC, Georgia, Texas, potentially, some other matchups in that conference. What games in the Big 12 this year or even projected moving forward will have those type of implications that will draw in the casual fan, right? Because we know people are going to watch Colorado, right? But to me, the long-term health and success of the Big 12, they need a championship level contender every year. Doesn't even have to be the same school, right? Because we've seen it bounce around in the SEC. Yeah. But what school or what draw, what team, what matchups are going to bring the casual fan over to the Big 12? That's my only concern about the conference long-term.
That's a big question from where the Pac-12 came from, right? Or you get like an Oregon, Washington. I didn't watch either of those games. I was watching Ole Miss play Mississippi State in the afternoon, right? Or Ole Miss play Arkansas over Washington and Oregon. The SEC product is in front of more eyeballs, and I think you hit it. The casual fan is going to watch that product more often than not. And the same goes for the ACC. There where Florida State sucked when they played Clemson, no one really cared. There was really no point to watch. However, in the SEC, even when LSU was 7-5, 6-6, their game against Alabama drew a lot of eyeballs because it's LSU, Alabama. In the Big Ten, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, any game those three are playing in, that's going to draw high eyeballs. But the pushback that I would give is the SEC is the only conference where it feels like most matchups are going to draw the casual fan. The Big Ten, when Purdue plays Illinois, I don't give a rat's ass. You don't. Nobody else does either. And the ACC, the back end, the front end of that. And even when Michigan plays Illinois, most people don't care. And the only matchup that draws in the SEC is when somebody plays Vanderbilt. Mostly across the board outside of that, everybody's glued to that SEC game. Therefore, I think that aspect keeps the Big 12 in a good spot.
I don't necessarily think that's true, though. And this is what I'll say that, right? Like, I do think for the large part, what you're talking about, even though the Big 12 has very passionate fan bases, right? So, like, we've seen what Iowa can do, right? When they have something to root for. So, even though, like, I guess we're talking about the casual fan, though, right? So, that point's kind of mute. I guess what I'll say is that going into the college football season this year, right? We know we have Michigan, right? People might think that Michigan is going to take a step back. They're still one of the best teams in the Big Ten, so they still have a chance to make the college football playoffs, right? Ohio State is loaded, right? Penn State always has a chance. They never, do anything with that chance, but they always have a chance. And then you added, right, Washington, who was in the championship last year, Oregon, who was in the playoff conversation last year, and USC, who potentially could get back into that conversation if Lincoln Riley learns how to coach a defense, right? So you have six teams that theoretically could be playing in the biggest games in college football this year if they have the type of season that they're accustomed to having. When we look at the Big 12, to me, outside of Colorado, and really Colorado's not even a contender, right? Like we know why we're watching them. Right, exactly. What team? Because like I said, people want to watch big matchups in college football. Of course, there's, going to be games every year that people watch, like Duke, North Carolina, or like you said, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, or the Iron Bowl, I guess is a better example.
Yeah, Duke, North Carolina was a really weird one to throw in there.
Oh, I meant basketball, right? Like, like people watch Duke, North Carolina every year, regardless of who's on the team, because it's just such a big matchup. Same thing with, Auburn and Alabama. Yeah. But like I said, like what matchups in the Big 12 will draw the casual fan? Because to me, there's no matchup in the Big 12 this year where you're like, damn, that team could win the national championship, or we could see this matchup again in the college football playoffs, or these are two of the best teams in college football. This is a top 10 matchup. To me, you just don't get anything like that from the Big 12 anytime soon. And while Colorado was carrying that conference, it doesn't matter as much. But eventually the Shadur, and Travis Hunter show is going to move on. And probably shortly after that, the Deion Sanders show is going to move on. And then what sells the casual fan to the Big 12? To me, I don't see it right now. But I still live in Big 12 country, obviously. So hopefully at some point, the Big 12 gets their new meal ticket because it won't be Texas and Oklahoma.
You got to build that. I'll validate what you've said because somebody out there is screaming for one that Colorado won't bring it in. But look at the Pac-12 numbers. Colorado dominated the TV market out there because of Deion Sanders, and Shedeur Sanders might be the best quarterback in the country, and he still is. The team's going to suck, but they'll draw viewership because of it's an MTV show happening in Boulder, Colorado right now. You could argue then like, oh, well, Utah's a national championship contender, and Utah's been up there the last 3 or 4 years, but then if they're playing number 19 Oklahoma State or number 17 Kansas State, is that drawing the eyes of Joe Schmo who lives in Syracuse, New York? I don't know. Whereas that guy's definitely watching when Georgia and Texas play in the regular season. So I'll validate what you said. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. My question to push back before we close the show, is there a point where we oversaturate things? Where you look at like say Georgia, Ohio State or Texas, Alabama, you say, all right, I've seen this song and dance too often every year. Like it's oversaturated at this point. I don't know. Like I just don't know if I care that much anymore.
I wouldn't say so because, it's kind of full circle, right? I started the show off with blue chip rate matters, right? At the end of the day, those are going to be the best teams in college football, right? And so I don't think you can say, well, one day I'll get tired of, Texas and Georgia playing because those are going to be the best athletes on the field every year, right? Now, maybe if it was a scenario like where the championship ended up, 2-3 years in a row, like the same thing where like maybe it's where it seemed like for a while it was just going to be Alabama and Clemson playing each other. Like I could see a scenario where that could be, work against or, be a detriment to college football and the casual fan. But no, these marquee matchups rule college football every year because the best players are on the field in these matchups. And people will never get tired of watching NFL players play against each other when Texas and Georgia take the field.
Can't agree. Can't disagree with that. Can't disagree with it. It's sucky that this is the way we go out. One of our final ever crossover editions. And it's got to be me lauding the Texas Longhorns. Jonathan, for Locked On Big 12 listeners who want to find more of your work or SEC fans that want to berate you, where can they find you?
I'm sure all the Locked On Big 12 listeners that want to listen to me know where to find me, but if there's any more of them, Locked On Longhorns, Locked On Longhorns on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, Locked On Horns on Twitter, and Jonzo Ball on Twitter. That's where you can find me for the next month and a week or so.
Which Locked On Longhorn fans are looking for more Locked On Big 12 content that you can follow at LOB12 on or LOBig12. I don't even know what my own Twitter handle is on Twitter. This has been, it always will be, Locked On Longhorns and Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.